On an ordinary summer evening in Arizona, a 21-year-old woman left home excited for what should have been a simple first date. She expected to return later that night. Instead, her phone suddenly went silent. The man she had gone to meet would soon become the center of a homicide investigation. Days later, investigators uncovered a discovery in the Arizona desert that transformed a missing person case into one of the state's most heartbreaking murder investigations. But one question continues to linger. What really happened during the hours between Arianna's last message and the moment she disappeared forever? Over the next few minutes, we'll carefully reconstruct Arianna's final known movements using confirmed police information, public records, and investigative reporting. We'll examine the first date that never ended. The digital trail detectives say led directly to a suspect. The painstaking search that stretched across Arizona. And the evidence investigators believe finally revealed where Arianna had been taken. Yet even with an arrest, many deeply personal questions remain unanswered. Questions that only one person may truly know the answers to. Before headlines reduced her story to another criminal investigation. Before police helicopters circled the Arizona desert. Before detectives pieced together timelines and evidence. There was simply Arianna. To her family and friends, she wasn't a headline. She was a daughter. A loved one. A young woman with dreams still unfolding. At just 21 years old, Arianna was entering a stage of life filled with possibility. Like many people her age, she was building friendships, meeting new people, and looking toward the future with optimism. Friends remembered her as warm and caring. Those closest to her described someone who enjoyed spending time with the people she loved and who maintained close contact with family. That ordinary habit, keeping in touch, would later become one of the first signs that something had gone terribly wrong. Because when Arianna stopped responding, the silence didn't feel normal. It felt alarming. For those who knew her best, disappearing without telling anyone simply wasn't something Arianna would do. That instinct would soon prove devastatingly important. Like millions of Americans every day, Arianna connected with someone online. Meeting new people through social media has become an ordinary part of modern life. Most conversations lead nowhere. Some become friendships. Others become relationships. And sometimes, they lead somewhere far darker. According to investigators, Arianna had recently begun communicating with a man she had met through social media. The two eventually agreed to meet in person. A first date. Nothing about that decision appeared unusual. Friends and family had no reason to believe she was walking into danger. There were no obvious warning signs publicly known at the time. No indication that this ordinary evening would become the final chapter of her life. As the day arrived, Arianna prepared for what should have been a normal night out. She left with every expectation of coming home. She never did. Every missing person investigation begins with one critical question. When was the victim last known to be safe? Investigators worked carefully to answer that question by reconstructing Arianna's final hours using digital records, surveillance footage, and witness information. According to police, Arianna traveled to meet the man she had arranged to see. At first, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. No emergency calls. No public disturbance. No immediate signs of violence. For a short time, it seemed like countless other first dates happening across America that same evening. But somewhere during those hours, something changed. Exactly what happened inside that window of time remains central to the criminal case. Investigators have released only limited details while court proceedings continue. What is publicly known is that, after that meeting, Arianna was never seen returning home. Families often describe a moment when concern quietly transforms into fear. It doesn't happen instantly. At first, there are reasonable explanations. Maybe traffic. Maybe a dead phone battery. Maybe plans changed. But as hours pass, those explanations become harder to believe. For Arianna's loved ones, the silence felt deeply out of character. She wasn't someone who simply vanished without letting someone know she was safe. As the night stretched into the following day, worry intensified. Calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. No reassuring update ever arrived. The young woman who always stayed connected had suddenly disappeared without explanation. And every passing hour reduced investigators' chances of finding answers quickly. Soon, family members made the decision no one ever wants to make. They reported Arianna missing. What began as desperate hope was about to become a full-scale criminal investigation. At first, police treated the case as a missing person investigation. But detectives quickly discovered something that changed everything. A digital trail, surveillance cameras, phone records, and evidence investigators say pointed directly toward the man Arianna had gone to meet. The search was no longer simply about finding a missing woman. It was becoming a race to uncover what investigators believed had happened after that first date. Missing person investigations often begin with hope. Investigators know that many people reported missing are eventually found safe. But they also know that the first 24 to 48 hours can be the most critical. Every phone call, every receipt, every surveillance camera, every witness, each could hold the key to finding someone before it's too late. For detectives investigating Arianna Bailey Jones' disappearance, time was already slipping away. Family members insisted something was terribly wrong. Arianna wasn't someone who disappeared without contacting the people she loved. That statement became one of the investigation's earliest guiding principles. If Arianna wasn't reaching out, investigators needed to determine why. Detectives began reconstructing Arianna's movements from the moment she left home. Rather than relying on memory alone, they turned to objective evidence. Digital footprints. According to investigators, Arianna had arranged to meet a man she had recently connected with on social media. That meeting became the last confirmed event before she disappeared. Police gathered surveillance footage from businesses, traffic cameras, and nearby locations. They also examined mobile phone data, electronic records, and information provided by witnesses. Each new piece of evidence added another small section to an incomplete puzzle. But one question remained unanswered. What happened after the two met? As investigators reviewed the evidence, one name began appearing repeatedly. The man Arianna had gone to meet. According to police, he quickly became a central focus of the investigation because he was believed to be among the last people known to have seen her alive. That fact alone did not establish guilt. In any missing person investigation, detectives routinely speak with the last known contacts to establish a timeline and verify events. But as investigators compared statements with digital evidence, they believed inconsistencies began to emerge. Exactly what those inconsistencies were has not been fully disclosed in public records because the criminal case remains ongoing. Still, investigators believed they had enough information to intensify their search. And that search was about to move far beyond city streets. Arizona's landscape is breathtaking. It is also immense. Miles of open desert, rocky terrain, and remote roads can quickly overwhelm search efforts. As investigators worked around the clock, officers searched areas they believed could be connected to Arianna's disappearance. Search teams combed difficult terrain under intense summer heat. Every hour increased the urgency. Every location searched carried the hope that Arianna might still be found alive. For her family, each passing day became an emotional battle between hope and fear. They waited for a phone call. A breakthrough. Anything. Instead, investigators continued following the evidence. Modern investigations are often solved not by a single witness, but by technology. According to investigators, detectives analyzed electronic data that helped reconstruct movements after Arianna's disappearance. That included information such as surveillance footage and other digital records collected during the investigation. Taken together, investigators believe the evidence pointed towards a remote area near Lake Pleasant. Why that location? At the time, police had not publicly explained every detail. As is common in active homicide prosecutions, investigators withheld certain evidence to protect the integrity of the case. But whatever detectives uncovered, it convinced them that this isolated landscape demanded immediate attention. And what they would eventually find there would forever change the direction of the investigation. Before we continue, if you appreciate carefully researched, respectful true crime documentaries that focus on facts rather than sensationalism, consider subscribing to MindWhisper Mysteries. Every case we cover represents a real person, a real family, and a search for answers that deserves to be remembered. If these stories matter to you, your support helps us continue telling them with the care they deserve. Now, let's return to the investigation. Search operations often end in one of two ways: relief or heartbreak. During their search near Lake Pleasant, investigators made a devastating discovery. Authorities located human remains in a shallow desert grave. The area was immediately secured as a crime scene. Forensic specialists began documenting every piece of evidence with extraordinary care. At that moment, investigators could not immediately confirm the victim's identity. That process would require scientific examination. But for Arianna's family, the fear they had carried since the day she vanished was becoming painfully real. As forensic experts worked to identify the remains, investigators were moving quickly on another front. They believed the evidence they had gathered pointed towards a suspect. Within days, an arrest would send shockwaves through the community. But the biggest question still remained. What evidence convinced investigators they could charge someone with first-degree murder? For days, investigators had searched with one hope in mind: that Arianna Bailey Jones would be found alive. Instead, the investigation reached the outcome every family fears. Following forensic examination, authorities confirmed that the human remains recovered near Lake Pleasant were those of 21-year-old Arianna Bailey Jones. What had begun as a missing person investigation had officially become a homicide investigation. For her family, there would be no joyful reunion, only unimaginable grief, and a long search for justice. As loved ones mourned, detectives continued working behind the scenes. Finding Arianna was only one part of the investigation. Now they needed to answer an equally important question: who is responsible? In criminal investigations, an arrest is rarely based on a single piece of evidence. Instead, detectives build a case brick by brick. Each witness statement, each surveillance video, each digital record, each forensic result. Together, they create a timeline prosecutors believe can withstand scrutiny in court. According to investigators, Arianna's final known movements were reconstructed using multiple sources of evidence, including surveillance footage, electronic records, and interviews. Police allege that these findings consistently pointed back to the man Arianna had arranged to meet on her first date. It's important to note that these allegations represent the prosecution's case. Under the U.S. justice system, every defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in court. That principle remains fundamental throughout any criminal proceeding. After days of investigating, police believed they had gathered sufficient evidence to take action. Authorities arrested the man they allege was responsible for Arianna's death. He was subsequently charged with first-degree murder and additional offenses connected to the investigation. Those charges marked a major turning point. For Arianna's loved ones, the arrest brought a measure of reassurance that the investigation was moving forward. But an arrest is not the same as a conviction. From that moment onward, the evidence would ultimately be tested through the judicial process. The burden would rest with prosecutors to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Although investigators have not publicly released every detail, court records and official statements outline several categories of evidence they believe are significant. First, digital evidence. Modern smartphones quietly record remarkable amounts of information, from location history to communications and timestamps. Investigators say electronic records helped establish a timeline of Arianna's final movements. Second, surveillance footage. Security cameras from businesses, roads, and surrounding areas reportedly helped detectives trace movements relevant to the investigation. Even brief moments captured on camera can become crucial when placed in chronological order. 30. Physical evidence recovered during the investigation. Authorities have not publicly disclosed every forensic finding, and many details remain reserved for court proceedings. That is common in homicide cases, particularly before trial. Holding back certain evidence helps preserve the integrity of the prosecution and prevents potential witnesses from tailoring their accounts to information already released publicly. For investigators, it wasn't one dramatic discovery that advanced the case. It was the accumulation of many small details. Individually, they might seem ordinary. Together, detectives allege they painted a very different picture. Even when police make an arrest, investigations rarely answer every question. Some answers may only emerge during trial. Others may never be known. Among the questions that continue to linger are: what exactly happened after Arianna met the man that evening? What was said during their final hours together? Was there a specific event investigators believe triggered the alleged crime? And perhaps the most difficult question of all: could anything have changed the outcome? These are questions investigators continue to examine through the legal process. Until evidence is presented in court, many of those answers remain unknown to the public. For the public, criminal cases often become headlines. For families, they become a permanent part of life. Every court hearing, every procedural delay, every new filing, each one is another reminder of someone they loved. The legal process can take months, sometimes years. During that time, families are asked to relive painful moments repeatedly as evidence is examined and testimony is heard. For Arianna's loved ones, the focus is no longer on finding her. It is on ensuring that her story is heard with dignity and that justice is pursued through the courts. An arrest answered one question, but it did not answer them all. The criminal case is still unfolding. What evidence will ultimately be presented before a jury? How will the defense respond? And what lessons can be learned from a case that began with what appeared to be an ordinary first date arranged online? While investigators have made an arrest, the legal process is far from over. As of this documentary, the suspect faces charges including first-degree murder in connection with Arianna Bailey Jones' death. Those charges are allegations brought by prosecutors. They must still be proven in court, where the prosecution and defense will each have the opportunity to present evidence, question witnesses, and argue their case before a judge or jury. That distinction matters. In today's world of instant headlines and social media speculation, it's easy for public opinion to race ahead of the legal process. But justice depends on evidence, not assumptions. The courtroom, not the internet, is where guilt or innocence is ultimately determined. For Arianna's family, however, one painful fact is already beyond dispute. Their daughter is gone, and no verdict can undo that loss. Cases like this often generate countless online theories. Some are well-intentioned. Others spread rapidly without evidence. As investigators, journalists, and responsible storytellers, it's important to separate what is known from what is merely believed. Confirmed by investigators, Arianna Bailey Jones disappeared after arranging to meet a man she had connected with online. She was reported missing when she failed to return home. Detectives used surveillance footage, digital evidence, and investigative work to reconstruct her final known movements. Human remains later identified as Arianna's were recovered near Lake Pleasant. Police arrested a suspect who has been charged with first-degree murder and related offenses. The criminal case remains subject to the judicial process. Not publicly confirmed. The exact sequence of events leading to Arianna's death. Any specific motive. The complete forensic evidence. Or every conversation that took place between Arianna and the suspect. Those details may emerge during future court proceedings, or some may never become public. Until then, responsible reporting means acknowledging what we do not know. One reason Arianna's story has resonated with so many people is because it feels so ordinary. Meeting someone online has become a normal part of modern life. Millions of people form friendships and relationships through social media and dating platforms every year. Most encounters are entirely safe. But cases like Arianna's remind us that trust is often built before we truly know another person. Investigators have not suggested that Arianna acted recklessly. From everything publicly known, she was simply doing something that countless people do every single day. That is precisely why this case has struck such a powerful emotional chord. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. Sometimes danger doesn't arrive looking dangerous. Sometimes it looks completely ordinary. Every homicide investigation leaves behind more than a crime scene. It leaves empty chairs at family gatherings, birthdays that will never be celebrated together, phone numbers that will never answer again. For investigators, closing a case often means completing an investigation. For families, there is no closing, only learning how to live alongside grief. Friends have remembered Arianna as someone with a bright future still ahead of her. A daughter, a friend, a young woman whose life ended long before it should have. Those who loved her now face the difficult task of carrying her memory forward while navigating a legal process that may continue for months or even years. True crime has become one of the most popular genres in modern media. But stories like Arianna's are not entertainment. They are reminders of the real work carried out every day by detectives, forensic specialists, search and rescue teams, prosecutors, and victim advocates. They also remind us of the extraordinary resilience shown by families who continue seeking answers in the face of unimaginable loss. When these stories are told responsibly, they preserve memories. They encourage public awareness. And sometimes, they help ensure that victims are remembered as people, not simply as case numbers. Arianna Bailey Jones left home expecting to enjoy a first date. She should have returned with stories to tell. Instead, her name became the center of a homicide investigation. Her family was forced into a journey no family should ever endure. And a community was left searching for answers to questions that may take years to resolve. As the criminal case moves through the courts, one thing should never be forgotten. Behind every piece of evidence, every court filing, every headline, was a young woman whose life mattered. If you've stayed with us until the end, thank you for helping keep Arianna's story alive. Here at MindWhisper Mysteries, our goal is never to sensationalize tragedy, but to tell these stories with compassion, accuracy, and respect for the people at their center. If you believe victims deserve to be remembered beyond the headlines, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss future investigations. And we'd like to hear from you. What part of this case stands out to you the most? Please keep the discussion respectful. Behind every comment is a real family still living with unimaginable loss. If you found this documentary informative, a like helps more people discover these carefully researched stories. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and never forget, behind every mystery is a real person whose story deserves to be remembered.